What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some battles in the Open Great League with one of the most normal looking teams you'll ever see on this channel based on the Pokemon alone, but I'm going to be running a move you probably completely forgot about when it comes to these Pokemon at least, and that move is Drain Punch. Now of course Drain Punch got buffed this season, but a few seasons ago, whilst it was still an awful move, it was distributed to a bunch of different Pokemon, including this trio. Now would you really want to choose to run Drain Punch over say Aquatail on the Quagsire? Possibly not for the Open Great League, but there's bound to be a limited meta where Drain Punch is actually the better option, and also you might just not want to use an Elite Charge DM on Aquatail. With Mud Bomb getting nerfed this season, Drain Punch could be a great alternative. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. Which meta Pokemon do you like to run with an unconventional or completely forgotten about moveset? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. So go into the first battle, leading Shadow Quagsire into Diggersby. Now this is going to be a matchup where you miss having Aquatail. Whilst yes, Drain Punch is also going to hit for super effective damage, you're going to see the damage output isn't really there. 3 Drain Punches will not be enough damage to take out a Diggersby, whereas with Aquatail, I think 2 Aquatails will put them into eventual Mudshot farm down range, which is quite ideal. And we're going to go for another Drain Punch here. The benefit, of course, is that we boost up our defense each time, so I don't need to use a shield here. Of course, Scorching Sands, now it's going to deal even less damage, but they end up dropping my attack stat, and not only that, they end up swapping out and catching a Drain Punch onto Toxapex. But I don't really mind that. We can come in with the Shadow Gengar, which typically doesn't have a great matchup into the Diggersby, but I'm double resisting the Poison Jab damage, and Shadow Punch is also going to hit fairly hard. Now I'm going to shield here. Unfortunately, I won't be able to fully Shadow Claw farm them down, but I can farm up a ton of energy and look to throw once again on CMB. Shadow Punch is going to connect. It gets the KO there. But also, I'm running Drain Punch on the Gengar, and the opponent might have just completely forgotten about that. So Drain Punch is not shielded. It boosts up my defense, and the opponent really does not have an answer to Gengar anymore as I'm boosted. Once again, I am double resisting the Poison Jab damage, or Poison Sting, or Acid, or whatever the heck their fast move is. Don't really care. It's kind of irrelevant at this point. We can fire off the Shadow Punch. I'm not going to bother shielding. The opponent actually goes for an Acid Spray. Doesn't really matter. We can come in with the Shadow Sableye, go straight for the Foul Play here. Foul Play won't quite get the KO from this range, but the damage is done. I actually don't need to shield this. Scald is going to hit fairly hard, but it won't be taking out the Sableye. Shadow Claw registers, it takes out the Tentacruel, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's upon there into the next battle. Going to see a Abomasnow in the lead. That is not a great matchup for the Quagsire. Going to be swapping out straight away. And unfortunately, the opponent makes a catch there, catching a Drain Punch onto a Toxicroak, which actually is still fairly fine. Like, both my Charge Shoes are going to be resisted anyways. But now I can go for a Foul Play. Foul Play, going to do more damage. However, unfortunately, they do just barely hang on, and they reach a Shadow Ball. So, you know what? I'm actually going to shield this. I wouldn't mind Switch Advantage. However, I guess it doesn't really help me that much just because I do have Gengar in the back, which isn't really going to appreciate being down a shield. However, we get to another Drain Punch here. Drain Punch is going to hit for super effective damage. I think maybe Foul Play still does more damage in neutral situations, so maybe that is a mistake there. But either way, their final Pokemon is going to be a Primeape. Now at this point, I have no clue why I went for Drain Punch this time, as boosting up my defense doesn't really matter too much when they're going to one-shot me with a Rage Fist anyways. But we fire off the Shadow Punch this time around. Shadow Punch is going to be shielded, and the opponent, well, if they're on close combat, it's probably game over. They are already boosted, but it's just another Rage Fist. The opponent then swaps out, they clear their boost, they catch a Drain Punch, which takes out the Abomasnow, and it boosts up my defense there, and now, of course, they don't have a boost anymore. The opponent gonna go for the Rage Fist, but it doesn't take out the Shadow Quagsire. I thought this game was over, but we hang on because of the boost to our defense. Drain Punch takes out the Primeape, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's upon there into the next battle. We're going to see Azumarill in the lead. So this is going to be a fairly neutral matchup here. I don't really intend on using any shields. If I go straight Stone Edge in this matchup, I can come very close to taking out the Azumarill, but I can at least put them into Shadow Claw farm down range. Now, I'm not going to shield this. If they full send a Hydro Pump, then fair play, but it is just going to be an Ice Beam. We can now fire off a Stone Edge once again. Stone Edge isn't quite going to get the KO like I mentioned, but actually it ends up grabbing a shield. The opponent is going to throw just before I reach a third Stone Edge, I'm happy to let the Quagsire go down, grab the shield advantage. Yes, of course, I am going to use a shield here, as Gengar is not going to appreciate an Ice Beam, certainly not a Hydro Pump, but we can now commit to a very aggressive Shadow Claw farm down, and Gengar's energy is going to be useful into pretty much anything. And of course, Drain Punch isn't exactly the hardest hitting charge move ever. However, we've got Shadow Punches. Shadow Punches can be spammed at a brutal rate here. The opponent is still not going to be able to farm me down before I reach a third Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch gets the KO up against the Fortress. Their final Pokemon is going to be an Acid Credilli. I can go straight for Drain Punch. It's going to hit for super effective damage, but it's going to boost up my defense. I do not need to shield a charge move coming from Credilli, and at this point, the opponent very likely going to see that damage and just concede the match. So, GG's to opponent there into the next battle. I can see Shadow Quagsire into a Credilli. So, of course, not a great matchup for me. Going to be safe swapping into my Shadow Gengar, and I'm met with a Swampert. Now, of course, we are very attack weighted. I expect to grab a shield here, but the opponent actually no shields the Drain Punch, and that is quite a big call on their end, because if I went straight for Shadow Punch, it's stab damage. It does more damage than Drain Punch. You can see that would have put them into Shadow Claw farm down range, whereas now, unfortunately, I have to throw 2 charge moves here, and then I'm still going to have to double shield if I want to flip switch advantage, which of course, with Credilli on Bullet Seed in the lead, I absolutely do want to flip switch advantage. But they're going to come in with a Charger Bug, and because I'm now double boosted in my defense, I can actually live the Volt Switch damage here and reach 2 more Shadow Punches before they fully farm me down. That is going to be ideal for me, as it is going to put them into Shadow Claw farm down range for the Sableye. They come back in with the Credilli, and I'm going to no shield here. Of course, I have no shields, so it means unfortunately they can go for the Rock Tomb before I do reach a Drain Punch and boost up my defense. However, of course, I wouldn't live 2 charge moves anyways, and the opponent is going to throw straight away. This is fine with me. This is now going to allow me to overfarm with my Quagsire as much as physically possible, and of course, boost up my defense in the process. I fire off the Drain Punch. Drain Punch gets the KO. The opponent, I think, is 1 away from back-to-back charge moves here. I'm 2 away from the Stone Edge, so I'm full sending Stone Edge, but no, I lose CMP, and this just comes down to the fact that I never play Quagsire. I hadn't realized it is bulkier than a Charger Bug. That was definitely range where Drain Punch would have taken them out there, so big mistake on my end, but GG to that trainer. Into the next battle, gonna see a very positive matchup for me. The opponent's gonna swap into a Azumarill. Now, this isn't the best matchup for Gengar, especially since I don't have Sludge Bomb. However, doesn't really matter. I'm gonna shield once. I can now very comfortably outpace them to back-to-back Shadow Punches. First one coming through here is going to be shielded by the Azumarill, with, of course, the threat of a potential Shadow Ball or a Sludge Bomb there, but Shadow Punch, number 2, gonna connect, does big damage, doesn't quite get the KO, but what it does do is set up a nice farm down for my Shadow Sableye. Now, of course, remember, Shadow Sableye could be on Power Gem, so if they come back in with the Talonflame, they likely have to shield here anyways, which means maybe I could have baited with a Drain Punch. However, I feel like that is quite risky. Either way, we go for Foul Play this time around. Foul Play, gonna deal decent damage, and what that does do is put them into range where I can shield once, go for the full Shadow Claw farm down, but the opponent gonna swap out into their final Pokemon, a Charger Bug, and this time I'm making no mistakes. We reach the Stone Edge. Stone Edge gets the one shot there. They come back in with the Talonflame. I can outpace to a Drain Punch. Drain Punch, of course, resisted damage. Doesn't deal much damage anyways, but it takes out Talonflame from that range, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I'm going to see Wigglytuff in the lead, so not the most ideal matchup for me, just because whilst Gengar is going to resist Charm in the back, it is going to struggle with the damage output there, just because Shadow Claw and Shadow Punch are both double resisted. And then, of course, Sableye, really not going to appreciate the matchup with the Wigglytuff. I went for Drain Punch first there, which means I can now live an Icy Wind. I don't need to commit shields here, and I can reach a Stone Edge. However, because they debuff me, that doesn't quite put them into range where I can get the KO. And not only that, they then come in with a Ferret, which honestly, whilst I know a lot of Wigglytuff users do pair Wigglytuff with a Ferret, it's usually with a Jellicent in the lead, so I kind of wasn't expecting a normal type in the back. In which case, I probably would have just swapped into my Sableye, knowing it's going to have a slightly better matchup into normal types. But the opponent just lets the Ferret go down. I don't mind that play at all. We come in with the Sableye, and I'm going straight for Drain Punch. I need to boost up my defense stats straight away. So Drain Punch, gonna be shielded. And you know what? They might full send a Stone Edge. I'm taking no risk, and they do full send the Stone Edge. Absolutely fine with me. The opponent now going to make a catch, but that's okay, because I did not want to tank a charge move or my Sableye, or even just a couple couple of charms there. So that is huge for me. The opponent does now have quite a lot of energy, however. The opponent goes for Stone Edge, but I'm able to hang on there. And honestly, I think this is a mistake. I go for Drain Punch. I expected maybe they overfarm by one, but they don't. They throw straight away. So the opponent goes for Aqua Tail. I'm going to come in with the Quagsire, but I lose CMP here. That is super unfortunate. I definitely had the chance to win that game with just fast speed pressure alone if I didn't throw a charge move with my Sableye, but unfortunately I messed up there, and it was down to a coin flip, which we lost with our Quagsire. But GG to our trainer into next battle. Going to see Scrafty in the lead, so this is a fine matchup for me. Of course, Drain Punch is going to hit for super effective damage here. Drain Punch is going to connect. It doesn't deal much damage there, but it will be enough damage to eventually two-shot them with a few more mud shots. The opponent goes for upper hand. I'm going to fire off the next Drain Punch, and then I'm actually going to swap into Gengar if they shield. The opponent is going to shield. I swap into Gengar, and of course, I am triple resisting counter. Yes, Foul Play is going to hit for super effective, so I will shield here, but now the opponent comes in with a Unova Stunfisk. I'm already at back-to-back Shadow Punches, so going to fire off the first one. Shadow Punch is going to connect. It does decent damage there. Second one won't quite KO, but it does threaten the final shield. At this point, I'm also going to shield here as the opponent is going to fire off the discharge, and then I'm going to look to catch the next discharge onto my Shadow Quagsire. I don't think they are quite in range where I can Shadow Claw farm down with the Gengar, so I'm actually going to come in with my Sableye. I might commit to the farm down, or I might actually just fire off a Drain Punch straight away, look to boost up my defense here. Of course, Drain Punch still going to get the KO here, so no point going for Foul Play. And let's see, the opponent's now going to come in with an Alolan Marowak, and because I'm boosted, even if they're on Shadow Ball here, Sableye will be able to tank this. And the opponent does full send a Shadow Ball. I go for the overfarm here just in case the opponent tries to make a catch onto the Scrafty, but it's going to be game over now as we've got the Drain Punch on our Gengar. Drain Punch, super effective damage. It will eventually take out the Scrafty, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to opponent there into the next battle. I see Skeledirge in the lead, so just a great matchup for the whole team here. The opponent's going to swap into Blastoise, and because we are ahead on energy, I'm going to go straight for a Drain Punch here. Drain Punch, of course, not going to deal much damage, but it is going to boost up my defense, and that should allow me to live 2 Hydro Cannons relatively comfortably. They fire off the first one. You can see that actually does do quite a lot of damage still, and we lose CMP. Once again, just my unfamiliarity with the Quagsire is kind of costing me here as we lose CMP, but we go for a slight undercharge. Honestly, don't know why I swapped out there. That was kind of pointless, but they're going to come in with a Charger Bug, and I'm actually going to go for a Drain Punch bait, expecting to grab a shield here. Don't know why I'm really struggling to talk today. I mean, it's not that unusual for me to struggle with the words for a shoutcast, but either way, I'm going to shield the discharge, and now I'm going to go for the Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch is going to do quite a lot of damage here. Shadow Punch actually gets the knockout, and because I've boosted my defense there, easily able to reach another Shadow Punch into Skeledirge, and that should be game over. Of course, we've still got the Sableye in the back. We can throw straight away. The opponent tries to throw on CMP, but they lose CMP apparently. Foul Play is going to connect. It takes out the Skeledirge, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see a Guzzlord in the lead. Now, I'm just going to say this battle is absolutely not how you play Drain Punch. This might be one of the worst battles I have ever had just because of like how poorly I played this out here. Now, at the moment, everything is going to plan. We go for Drain Punch here. We shielded the first charge move because I was intending on just going straight Drain Punch. So that's fine. Nothing too out of the ordinary so far. We live the Brutal Swing, and this is where things start to get a bit messy. We go for Drain Punch, number 2, grab the final shield from the opponent. At this point, I'm double boosted. I'm thinking, well, we definitely take a Brutal Swing, so I might as well commit to a Stone Edge, but no, we don't live that. I could have just thrown a Drain Punch, and now we come in with Sableye. The opponent, looks like they actually lag a turn there, so that allows me to get to a Drain Punch before they throw a charge move, which is quite nice. I'm going to no-shield this, but I can still never farm down with the Sableye here, and unfortunately, once again, I'm boosted. I live a Brutal Swing from this range, but no, I don't, so I've just sacrificed 2 Pokemon for no reason whatsoever. We come in with the Gengar, and they've got a Mudslap Gastrodon in the back. One of the worst things we could see. We can go for Shadow Punch. It does respectable damage, but they can just Mudslap farm me down, and honestly, an absolute horror show on my end. That's like one of the worst games I've ever played, but GG's to that trainer. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Charger Bug in the lead. So this time around, this is where having Drain Punch isn't really ideal because it does feel a lot riskier to bait with a Drain Punch compared to baiting with an Aqua Tail. But they overfarm so much, I should have just baited there. They would not let a Charger Bug go down with already back-to-back charge moves stored, so that is definitely a mistake on my end. At this point, we just double send the Stone Edge. We're going to no-shield this, as the opponent is going to fire for the Exeter. Now, they should be at back-to-back charge moves already, so I'm going to throw straight away, hoping they do not try and make a catch at all, and the opponent doesn't. They throw straight away, so Shadow Punch is going to connect, and it will be taking out the Charger Bug. Then I come in with a Fire, which is not ideal for me, so I'm going to swap into my Sableye, and they do not throw straight away. This is going to allow me to go for a Drain Punch here. Drain Punch, going to boost up my defense stat, of course. And I might as well shield. I don't know what their final Pokemon is just yet. They go for a Trailblaze. The opponent gonna swap out as they swap into a Shadow Fortress. Now here, I'm gonna go for the Foul Play. Foul Play is gonna hit for decent damage here. And what I'm trying to do is force the opponent to throw some energy. This should be ranged by 2 Shadow Claws, farms down with the Gengar. And no, actually it's not. But because they full sent a Rock Tomb rather than Sand Tomb, it allows me to get the farm down anyways. Drain Punch gets the KO up against the Farret, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to opponent there. I did get quite lucky that they didn't just go for a Sand Tomb up against the Sableye, but into next battle, and this is definitely a matchup where not having Arc Tail is going to be costly because Drain Punch and Stone Edge are both resisted into Annihilate. So I swap straight away into Sableye. Gonna go for the Drain Punch. You can see it really doesn't do much damage up against Carbink. However, I can just continuously boost up my defense. So I'm gonna shield the first charge move. I'm gonna fire off another Drain Punch here. And again, Drain Punch not gonna do much damage, but eventually it is going to add up over time. We can go for a third Drain Punch here. However, their Rock Throws are still dealing decent damage. They will put me into range where a Stone Edge, or sorry, a Rock Slide would KO, but we're now going to come in with a Shadow Quagsire. Not ideal for me as they have Cresselia in the back. Cresselia very likely to be on Grass Knot, but I can reach a last second Drain Punch here. Drain Punch is going to connect, and it really doesn't do much damage. It also doesn't grab a shield either, and Grass Knot still with a defense boost easily takes me out. We can come back in with a Sableye, and I'm just going to be forced to no shield here. The opponent is going to go straight for a second Grass Knot. Now, does this set up a big farm down for Gengar? The opponent gonna swap out of that matchup back into Carbink, but we can go for Drain Punch, boost up my defense stat. And I think I have to shield here anyways. I think Cresselia probably on Grass Knot and Moonblast, and I need to save, well, enough HP here to get to a charge move. Well, back-to-back charge moves up against the Annihilate. So at this point, we're going to go for the Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch, going to grab the final shield, and we can win CMP. Shadow Punch will be enough damage to get the KO, but it just depends. Does Cresselia reach a charge move? Unfortunately, the answer is yes, and whilst my defense is boosted, Grass Knot is resisted and non-stab, it still takes out the very glassy Shadow Gengar, and I do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle. I'm going to see Sableye in the lead. So this is a fine matchup here. We're just going to stay in and we're just going to full send a Stone Edge. Once again, an awkward matchup here, having Drain Punch, which is resisted. But we can full send Stone Edge if they no-shield this. I'm going to try and snipe with my own Sableye. However, unfortunately, not quite able to deal enough damage. So I might as well shield this because I can now go for a Drain Punch into whatever comes in, and we're going to see that's a Corviknight. So Drain Punch, not going to deal much damage there, but boosting up my defense stats should now allow me to pretty comfortably live a payback. So we're now going to go for Foul Play. Foul Play gets them fairly low. They are going to fire off the charge move. The opponent is going to full send the payback, which I'm able to tank. We then swap into Shadow Gengar. We get the farm down, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Bug Bite Fortress. So this is amazing for Gengar. We are going to double resist the fast food pressure. We can then boost up our defense there with the Drain Punch. All I need to do is make sure the opponent does not catch a charge move onto Sableye. So I overfarm the opponent, tries for the catch. It doesn't work out. We've now got back-to-back Shadow Punches. First one should grab the final shield, and the second one will be sealing the deal on this battle. Shadow Punch is going to hit for enough damage to take out the Fortress, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see Galarian and Corsola in the lead. So, this is going to be an okay-ish matchup. Once again, Drain Punch does not help in this matchup. We can go for Stone Edge, but actually, I thought because they have Corsola, they might have, like, I don't know, a Wigglytuff in the back. So, I kind of need to bait it out for my backline. So, I swap out into Sableye, and we're met with a Shadow Drapion instead. At this point, I'm going to show the first charge move here as they fire off the Crunch. However, they then drop my defense there after just boosting it with a Drain Punch. We can now go for another Drain Punch, and I should still live a Crunch. However, it's not going to be super comfortable. I'm also not confident that I could Shadow Claw farm them down afterwards, so instead I'm going to swap, bank a charge move, come in with the Quagsire, and the opponent comes in with their final Pokemon, which is going to be a Corviknight. Now this is quite tricky because Corsola still has a ton of energy, and I do have a shield disadvantage. However, we did just grab that shield back with a Drain Punch from the Quagsire. Now, can I tank a payback from this range? I am boosted, but payback barely doesn't KO, but they snipe with the Quagsire. So at this point, my only win condition is making a CMP tie sack swap here, which we go for, but the opponent is way smarter than that. They know not to throw straight away, and as a result, whilst foul play does connect, they've already got back-to-back Nightshades. First one grabs the final shield, and this is Shadow Gengar we're talking about. Nightshade, super effective, easily takes us out, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see Shadow Annihilate in the lead. So once again, not a great matchup for me at all. So going to be safe swapping into Sableye, and I'm met with a Licky Licky. Now this is actually not a bad matchup at all with Drain Punch. Drain Punch going to hit for super effective damage. You can see it won't quite two-shot them. However, we can reach a second Drain Punch before they fire off the Shadow Ball. And now we can so comfortably tank this. I'm going to no shield. The opponent goes for Shadow Ball, but a very comfortable tank there. The opponent will now outpace to the next Shadow Ball. However, I don't mind using one shield in this matchup as they fire off the second. We can now look to overfire massively, fire off another Drain Punch, and if the opponent shields here, they are not going to reach another Shadow Ball before I get to another Drain Punch. We are triple boosted. Body Slam double resisted. We do not need to shield there. They tried to snipe with Empoleon, but it backfires as we reach yet another Drain Punch before coming in with the Shadow Quagsire. Now I do have to be careful here. Like I mentioned, Quagsire completely walled by the Annihilate with the charge move set, so I'm actually going to choose just not to bother throwing at all, instead setting up a Shadow Claw farm down for the Gengar, because if we're ahead on energy with our Shadow Gengar, I should be able to very easily take out Annihilate, but actually, I don't even need to throw a charge move here. Of course, if the opponent wants to try and make a catch onto Licky Licky, they're more than welcome to, but we can Shadow Claw farm them all the way down, actually Shadow Claw farm down the Licky Licky as well, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the final battle of this video, leading into a Gastrodon. So, this is going to be another matchup where Drain Punch isn't ideal for me. Basically, if Stone Edge is resisted, then Drain Punch is a little bit awkward here just because it just doesn't do much damage, but I'm going to shield the first charge move as it makes most sense to, as now I can go for another Drain Punch, boost up my defense stat once again, and then much more easily tank the next charge move. So the opponent is going to no shield once again, and they're just going to throw straight away. I think this is just going to be a Body Slam here, so no shield, Body Slam, not going to deal much damage at all. I'm now going to look to overfarm, farming up to at least back-to-back Drain Punches before going for the next. So Drain Punch is going to get the KO. They're going to come in with a Talonflame, and honestly, I might have been able to bait here, but with full standing Stone Edge is going to be shielded, and now I'm going to swap into my Shadow Sableye. I'm going to shield here because the opponent throws straight away. That gives me a Shadow Claw in for free, which means I will still outpace them to back-to-back foul plays here before they get to the next Flame Charge. So we go for the first one, grab the final shield, foul play number 2 should be enough damage to get the KO, and let's see what is their final Pokemon. It's a Bastiodon. Now here, I'm going to make a really important play. I swap out, I bank the Drain Punch, and I'm able to swap out just in time to reach a Drain Punch on Gengar. Drain Punch, double super effective. It is not a hard-hitting move. However, it will be enough damage to put them into range where a Drain Punch from the Shadow Sableye will get the KO. So of course, we bank the charge move here. We go for it straight away. Drain Punch gets the KO up against the Bastiodon, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.